This is the Retro XP Podcast, a podcast dedicated to retro video games from the first and second generation with the Odyssey, Atari 2600, and a television, all the way up to Generation 7 with the Xbox 360, PS3, and Wii. Today in this episode, we'll just talk about a bunch of pickups I got at a recent video game convention I went to, AI-enabled light gun games, the most expensive Sega Saturn game to date, and my experiences at a video game conventions. And if you haven't been one, what are some of the ins and outs of it? So without further ado, let's get started. Retro XP is now part of the Hair of the Dogcast network, joining the likes of Raw Dogs, Zombie Dogs, Elden Dogs, and of course the flagship Hair of the Dogcast podcasts. You'll most likely find me on a few of those podcasts, most notably Zombie Dogs, where all we talk about is the Resident Evil series. The network has tons of bonus content and episodes on Patreon at patreon.com/hairofthedogcast. So help support us by donating and not only getting access to those early access and Patreon exclusive episodes, but also access to the Discord community exclusive to Patreon members with a minimum of $3 a month. There's a room exclusive to Retro XP in there where we talk about retro video games and of course our episode discussions. Otherwise, you can follow me on X, Threads, and Instagram at RetroX Podcast, as well as my YouTube channel, RetroX Podcast, same name. Whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on, be sure to follow and enable notifications so you can find out when I drop a new episode. So we're in the middle of October right now, and of course it's spooky game season, and I talked about this earlier, that I like to pull out some old games, some old horror games that I like to play during the month, and one of the series I pulled out was the Fatal Frame series. Not exactly for sure if I'm going to get through all of them. It's currently October 14th, and I haven't really even completed the first Fatal Frame, but I'll probably jump on to maybe play a little bit of Fatal Frame 2 and Fatal Frame 3 for the PlayStation 2. But surprisingly, one of the more iconic horror franchises and one of the most unique. If you haven't played the Fatal Frame series, you're basically going into it's a Japanese horror style game. So you have unique ghost design that is very quintessential Japanese because they take a lot of Japanese Shinto lore and ghost stories and almost turn them into real life. The cover of the first Fatal Frame game it says based on a true story, but it's kind of like a weird translation error, because it's actually based on legends, like actual true legends within Japanese Shinto culture and religion. So it's not, the game, you're not playing an actual true story. That'd be kind of, that'd be a little weird. But yeah, the Fatal Frame series, like for example, the first one is you're this girl that is going into this haunted Japanese manor. It's like an old mansion in the middle of the woods. And you're going in trying to find your brother who went in and got lost. And you're basically only armed with a camera. And this is taking place in, I think, it's kind of like a old, I don't think they actually say, maybe I'm misremembering, but I could have sworn they didn't really say a year, but you have like an old film camera. Like it's not like you're taking pictures with a cell phone camera or anything. Keep in mind, this game came out in the early 2000s. But so you have this old-timey camera, you have to pick up actual film, and in order to fight the ghosts off, you have to snap pictures with your camera. The game is in third-person mode, so you're wandering around kind of in fixed camera angles with some moving camera angle work. And a game like this does that really well because in horror games, a lot of times what you don't see is the scariest part. And when you're walking down a hallway and you're about ready to turn a corner, you really don't know what's down that corner because of the fixed camera angle. So there's a huge amount of suspense and a huge amount of terror with that. Like, especially if you're going into a new area, then you're like, what's around that corner? Like, I guess I won't know unless I, turn that corner or move down that hallway. So the game itself is not like inundated with enemies. A lot of times the ghosts are pretty random. They come out of nowhere. You'll hear, kind of like the music stop, and then you'll get, this beating heart rate. Your controller starts to vibrate, and then, you'll hear like ethereal ghost sounds, popping through. So that, means you have to pull out your camera and start snapping pictures. There's particular film that you have to get in order to, make your shots, your picture shot stronger, which can do more damage against more powerful ghosts. So, occasionally you're wandering around the mansion, you have to pick up certain items and certain puzzle pieces to get you access into certain areas of the mansion. And then obviously, stronger film you have to collect. You don't have an unlimited amount. You have an unlimited amount of like the weaker film, so you don't necessarily ever run out of film. But the stronger film types, yeah, you're going to have a limit on those. So obviously be careful how you use those. But the overall lore is like it's like this old Japanese tradition of like I guess this old lore of this I guess like to keep Hell's Gate closed. It's something to do with hanging a girl with 5 ropes, one around each limb and then one around her neck, and it's like the rope hanging ritual that is supposed to keep evil at bay. And something happened, I think, in the past where the ritual failed itself, and then of course you have to stop this Hell's Gate from opening, and then obviously infecting the world, so to speak. So you're just a girl, an innocent, I think, teenage girl running through this mansion trying to stop a calamity from happening. So it's a very suspenseful game. It's not as open. The mansion's not itself as open as some other modern games are. Like there's not a chance you're gonna get lost. Most of the time the game kind of directs you to go certain places or to do certain things. So it's not necessarily like you're going to be wandering around the mansion lost for most of the time. You're going to pretty much know where you're going. The rooms themselves are very small, and, there's not a lot of branching paths or anything like that. You may have to go back and forth a lot. You may have to retrace your steps, but otherwise, I mean, dude, the Fatal Frame series is so good. I haven't played any of the more recent ones. I'll talk about one recently that I picked up that I haven't played that I'm excited to play. I think Xbox did announce that they, in their I think Japanese Tokyo Game Show convention, that Fatal Frame 2 is getting a full-on remake. I'm really excited for that because I think Fatal Frame 2 was my favorite out of the original trilogy. So I'm pretty excited for that. Also, I've been playing Quake 2. I brought my Rogue Ally over the weekend to RetroFest Arkansas, and I was like, if I'm gonna be out here buying, buying retro games, I should be playing maybe retro games on my Rogue Ally, which is that's what a lot of people buy these handhelds for, to play kind of retro games, which is kind of cool. But I fired up my Xbox Game Pass app, and I was like, let me play some Quake 2. That game is fun. Like, it's you can't be running and gunning. A lot of times you have to be a little bit tactical with how you engage your enemies, and then how you enter rooms. If you're not careful, you can get blasted pretty easily. But there's plentiful amount of health items that you can pick up along the way, and armor pieces that can help protect you. So you just got to be careful. You can't be just like running around and gunning and shooting. Like, I would say most first-person shooters nowadays aren't like that, with the exception of Doom, where it's like you got to keep moving, you got to keep shooting. But Quake is kind of similar in that, but you can't be, you're not invincible. Let's just say that. So that game is still fun. The soundtrack still rips. I talked about it in one of my last episodes about metal music in video games. So soundtrack still rips to this day. I'm like kind of like bobbing my head as I'm, running through the area, running through the levels, trying to, shoot my way through. So what's up for news? Not much, but I know I talked about this before in a previous episode, but there is something called the Game AI powered light gun. And when I mean game, I mean G, AIM, and E. And this is, according to Time Extension, Japanese company Tosai Denki caused quite a stir when they announced they were creating an AI light gun to bring to Namco Time Crisis, basically bringing it home, so to speak. So the original story was that it was a Kickstarter, and it was using bespoke technology that utilizes a high-resolution camera and AI. The gun comes with a custom licensed version of Time Crisis, faithfully recreated from the original arcade, and it gives you a unique arcade experience. Also, this comes packed with Point Blank, Steel Gunner, and Steel Gunner 2. And the shtick with this AI-powered gun, apparently it recalibrates itself when you move around or change shooting angles, distance, or perspective. It just works, allowing you to simply enjoy the game. There are no complex setups, no workarounds. Simply plug and play for a seamless experience, and enjoy those classic light gun games that you that you remember it enjoying in the arcade or even at home. So this is, if you don't know, if you fire up a light gun game on your old PlayStation 2, you have to calibrate the gun before you even play the game. And it obviously depends on how close you're sitting to the screen, at what angle, what distance, so you have to, like, are you sitting down, are you standing up? If you change positions, like say if you calibrate it for a seated position, but then all of a sudden you decide I need to stand up, it's not going to translate. The calibration's going to be still thinking like you're sitting, and then your aim is going to be off. So I think the shtick with this is that the AI will recognize when you change positions and then adjust it by itself. So according to the initial crowdfunding campaign, it had pretty much smashed its goal. It went live with a modest funding goal of $48,000 American, and after a few days, I think it basically hit $409,000. That's wild. That is I mean, yeah, smashed its target goal would be an understatement. They've opened pre-orders for those who wish to make the purchase via more traditional means. So you can go on their website, and even though if you didn't contribute to the Kickstarter, you can still pre-order it. So Time Extension actually got hands-on with this gun, and they came away pretty impressed with this, with the overall accuracy and performance. They said, quote, while the AI angle has come under serious scrutiny, because anytime someone hears the words AI, it's it's like, oh God, what is it? Is this shooting for me or anything like that? Tosai Denki has since revealed to Time Extension that the game's machine learning is focused more on pre-release training, which enables it to recognize your TV screen, no matter what environment you're playing in, or for that matter, what size display you own. So it's not like like I said, it's not like it's doing the shooting for you. It's just there's tools that are recognizing the TV that you're playing on without having to do any sort of manual adjustments like I talked about earlier. It won't learn new abilities during play or anything like that. So it's not going to be like Skynet and all of a sudden go live or anything like that. So you don't got to worry about anything about that. On the website, there are 3 different bundles that you can get. You can get the basic bundle, which is $99 US. It comes with a light gun, and then obviously the mini console that you plug into the TV itself, featuring Time Crisis. The premium version is $150. It comes with the light gun, the little mini console that you plug into your TV. So when I say mini console, think of like a tiny video game system. It features Time Crisis, Point Blank, Steel Gunner, and Steel Gunner 2. It comes with a pedal as well. So if you're playing Time Crisis, you have to duck. So this actually comes with a pedal that you can actually use, and then a collectible Time Crisis pin badge. I would say this is pretty much the way to go, I would think. Ultimate, which is $200, $199 US. It comes with 2 light guns, so you can enjoy co-op gaming. It comes with that TV mini console, which features Time Crisis, Point Blank, Steel Gunner, and Steel Gunner 2. It comes with a pedal, and it comes with the collectible pin badge, a diorama stand, and then a Type-C AC power adapter, which leads me to believe that the mini console does not come with a power adapter. So keep that in mind. I want to say most electronics that you buy right now don't come with power adapters. So this one actually comes with that. So if you like to play shooter games with your friends, this the Ultimate may be the best way to go. Maybe split it up $100 a piece, which actually is a pretty good deal. If you have someone that maybe you want to go half in on, honestly, this is probably the best way to go because the basic model comes. It's 900. Yeah, not 900. It's $99, and it comes with just a light gun and Time Crisis. That's it. If you were to go half and half with someone on this, you're each getting a light gun. Of course, you're only getting one mini console, but you're getting, more games, and you're getting that power adapter. So, I think that's kind of cool. So, otherwise, also from Time Extension, we now officially have the most expensive Sega Saturn game to have ever been sold. And this is an interesting one. This is one that I've never heard of, and I don't think anyone else has. But if you've been collecting for the Sega Saturn, you know that a lot of those games are expensive, especially some of the working designs games like Magic Knight Ray Earth, which I think that was the last Sega Saturn game to have been ever released, at least in America. And it's worth like well over $1,000, I think, at this point. So, but we have a new king, which this game sold on eBay for $8,000. And this game was only distributed in Japan, and this hasn't really been officially printed in America or in the West, so to speak, but there have been, redistributed print runs that aren't like official print runs, so to speak. The Sega guys posted this on their YouTube channel, and they basically found that this game called Deli Soba Deluxe sold on eBay for $8,301, so to speak. So to use the perfect numbers. So this was developed by Cave and based on a game within TBS's mid-1990s Japanese game show Tokyo Friend Park. So the game known as Deli Soba, which is basically a like a combination of like delivery soba, and basically this was on a game show. It saw Japanese celebrities controlling a virtual motorcycle while trying to deliver soba. And soba is like basically like, like noodles, Japanese noodles, so to speak. And it's a port of the game, so it's not like an official port. And this game was actually given to people that participated in the show. It was never available retail, but it was given away. Not known if it was a prize or if contestants just received it just for the heck of it or whatever. So I don't know how the seller got it. There are very few of these copies in circulation, and this is definitely I think takes the reins as one of the most expensive games ever to have come out, if not obviously the most expensive game to come out on the Sega Saturn. This game kind of looks like I would say a mix of like maybe like Max TT on the Sega Saturn. It's like a kind of like a motorcycle racing game, and kind of like a cross even also between Cruis'n USA. And I mean, it's a solidly running game. Like I was watching the Sega guys, their video on it, and it looks like kind of like a smooth running game. Like, you're trying to deliver soba while also avoiding traffic and running through, you have a time limit to deliver your soba. So it's almost kind of even like, Crazy Taxi as well, but with less Offspring and Bad Religion in it. It looks like a fine game. Is it worth $8,000? I know. But if you have $8,000 that is just sitting in your wallet that you have no idea what to do with, there are probably worse things you could spend your money on. Yeah, like video game collecting is kind of crazy to the point where it's like you get these rare games, extremely rare games that are just almost like, the price of a mortgage payment. I mean, if you live in a multi-million-dollar house, but yeah, like, good Lord. So yeah, that's that. There are some games out there that have gotten demakes before, and one of the more recent ones that was pretty popular that got an official like PlayStation 1 demake was the game Bloodborne. Bloodborne initially came out on the PlayStation 4, probably one of the more prolific like Souls-like games ever to have come out. And I know a lot of the fans out there want like a remastered 60 frames per second kind of version for the PlayStation 5, but unfortunately that's been falling on deaf ears for a very long time. So fans out there created a demake, a PlayStation 1 demake of Bloodborne, which is interesting because why? There's a market for every type of video game out there, and for collectors out there, or even just like old gamers that have maybe cut their teeth on PlayStation 1 hack and slash games. You have basically this option to play PlayStation 1 type of Bloodborne game. So anyway, what I'm talking about now is Legend of Dragoon is getting a demake, which is weird because this is a PlayStation 1 game getting a demake. And this is according to Retro Dodo. Legend of Dragoon first came out in the West in 2001, and it was out in Japan in 1999, and it's been one of the more prolific PlayStation 1 RPGs ever. And it was developed by Sony Studio. So it's almost kind of surprising that we never got to see a remake or a remaster of some kind. You can play it on your PlayStation 5, so you can download it. And it's got, up-resed graphics. So it's, they cleaned up a lot of the textures and cleaned up a lot of the jaggy edges. So it's good to play it on your PlayStation 5 right now. But I think, if we saw Final Fantasy VII get a complete remake, why can't we get a Legend of Dragoon remake? And, to state the obvious, Legend of Dragoon wasn't as popular as Final Fantasy VII. And that's where developers are going to go for the money. The publishers are going to go for what's going to sell. Legend of Dragoon is not going to sell the same numbers as a Final Fantasy VII remake. However, I've heard the last Final Fantasy VII Rebirth technically didn't sell as well as they thought they would. So who knows? So gamers like Sir Devilot have dedicated years of their lives to creating new projects in the Legend of Dragoon universe to keep fans entertained, because we've really had nothing for like 26 years at this point. The remake has been going on for around 5 years now, and he took on the project from Italian developer Flanville during the pandemic in 2020, and has pretty much run with it ever since. And he's created a small team to bring this demake of the PS1 classic to life. And if you've ever used the engine RPG Maker, this is kind of it looks like that, and it looks like I would say early Final Fantasy games, and that's not a knock on it. It looks like Game Boy Advance style graphics in this like RPG Maker engine, so to speak. And you can actually download this game right now. The only caveat is that the developer goes on to explain that they've run into some problems with regards to the sprite development regarding one of the final boss battles, Ouroboros crawl animation. And the developer said, that's where we are currently stuck in development. And instead of waiting any longer to finally release this publicly for all fans to dive into and enjoy, we're just moving forward with the project's release here today. So you can go onto their itch.io page. The game is currently covering all events from the original game leading up to that epic Ouroboros boss fight in Limestone Cave. And this first public release, when they released it earlier, was intended to take the player all the way up to the existing Limestone Cave, like in the original demo itself. So the general idea that the developers wanted to paint, like I said, was it's a work in progress, and is hopeful that they can get someone on board who can maybe help the team to get over this hurdle and complete the demake fully. So with the game being out there, you can download it, and maybe if you have like coding experience, game development experience, and you can say, I can fix that. If you have a Windows PC or Android phone, you can play this game. And if you think you can, fix the game, hit up the development team. If I remember, I'm gonna try to post the official itch.io page in the description, so you could check it out at any time. You could download this completely for free. This is a passion project from fans of the series, so definitely give them support and let them know that if anything, if there's gets enough downloads, maybe Sony can look at it and say, oh, hey, maybe we should give something more into the Legend of Dragoon universe. Yeah, we'll see. Otherwise, in terms of releases, I talked about in one of my recent episodes, I did talk about all the kind of like remakes, remasters, re-releases for the month of October. So I won't go through anything like that. However, Xbox Game Pass, we're getting Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 enhanced editions. So if you're a Game Pass subscriber, and I think this is only for the PC, you can, download these for free. If you're still a Game Pass subscriber, because it's tough being a Game Pass subscriber now with the recent 50% price increase. But if you're still dedicated, this is that option. Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, the remaster, is coming out as well. Again, I think this has always been on the Xbox, but I think you can now get this. I think they took it off and they put it back on again. It's weird. Nintendo Switch 2 Online. Actually, Nintendo Switch Online in general. You're getting Bubsy and Fatal Fury Special. Both games were from the SNES. And you're also going to be getting Mario and Wario from the Super Famicom. So this was a Japanese-only game. This was developed by the Pokemon team. I have no idea what this game entails. I watched gameplay of it, and I have no idea what's going on. It's developed by the Pokemon team, so the Pokemon games, I don't know. I have no idea. So, otherwise, that's kind of really what's new on a lot of the modern hardware. Let's talk about some of the games I picked up, and then we'll go right into the main topic, which is video game conventions. Okay, so I recently went to a video game convention. I went to RetroFest Arkansas. Now, I live in Milwaukee, and I drove down to Conway, Arkansas. I left early on Friday morning, and I got there pretty much. It was like a 10-hour drive, 11-hour drive. And I got there, and I was like, okay, the convention Saturday, Sunday. I created a list of some of the games that I'm looking for. Granted, the list is getting smaller and smaller because my collection is growing to the point where it's like I pretty much have everything I want. And nowadays, I'm kind of more interested in collecting maybe some of the things that I missed out on, or some of the things that I never got to experience. And one of those things that I never got to experience was the Ratchet and Clank series. Admittedly, when I had a PlayStation 2 in the early 2000s, I was in my 20s, and I was more interested in the kind of like more serious, rugged, survival horror, gritty action adventure games. I really wasn't interested in games like Ratchet and Clank or Jak and Daxter or anything like that. I didn't get into the Ratchet and Clank games until the PlayStation 3, when I was like, this game came out, I think A Crack in Time or something like that. I think that was the first one. And I was like, well, this game actually looks pretty good. Maybe I should pick it up. And of course, I had so much fun with it. I'm thinking to myself, I can't believe I missed out on this series, It was during the time when I was in my 20s, and I was like, yeah, that looks like a bunch of kid, stuff. But so I ended up picking up the entire quintilogy. It's 5 games, 5 mainline games. So I got Ratchet and Clank. I got Ratchet and Clank Deadlocked. I got Going Commando, Size Matters, and Up Your Arsenal. I hear interesting things about Deadlocked because Deadlocked was a little bit more, I think, shooter focused and team-based gameplay. Apparently there's like multiplayer, co-op, and online battles on here as well. And I think everybody has different experiences with all the different games. I think Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal is one of the most highly rated. It looks like PlayStation Magazine gave it a 10 out of 10, which is not bad. These games are developed by Insomniac, and as we know, they've pretty much moved on to make the Spider-Man games, and then they also are making the new Wolverine game. So what's interesting about these Ratchet and Clank games is say the first 2, Ratchet and Clank, for example, comes with this poster, and it's a really cool poster. If you want to see, if you go on my YouTube channel, I go through every game that I picked up in kind of more visual detail. But it comes with this poster, and on the back of the poster is literally the manual of the game, so it's kind of cool. I want to say one of the which one was it? Was it Size Matters or Up Your Arsenal? I forget which one. It was Up Your Arsenal, I remember, yeah. The guy was selling it. These go for between $10 to $15 a piece. he was selling 2 copies of Up Your Arsenal. One was $13, one was $15. The $13 one had the manual. The $15 one didn't. And I think he caught himself like, oh no, that was priced wrong. And I was like, well, I can offer you $13 for this one with the manual, like you said on the actual case. And he's like, all right, fine. So, it's just $2. But, yeah, I'm excited to have this series. I ended up picking up the Lord of the Rings games for the PlayStation 2. I got Return of the King and the Two Towers. If you're a Lord of the Rings fan, these are 2 of the best licensed games to get. You can actually live out a lot of the, amazing action sequences that you saw in the movies and read through the books. Like you can actually see exclusive movie content in the Two Towers game. So, in the soundtrack from the Fellowship of the Ring is in that one too. So that's pretty cool. I didn't know that. But I played these a little bit when I was, in my early 20s, but and they were solid games. I hope to jump in on these games. Nano Breaker for the PlayStation 2. This is a Konami kind of like a hack and slash action game. I vaguely remember playing this, but this was like $22. And I was like, it's a decent condition case. Good manual and everything like that. So, yeah, whatever. I was trying to collect the Siphon Filter games for the PlayStation 2 as well. So I picked up the Omega Strain and Dark Mirror. I picked these up for I think it was on a Sunday. So the guy was like giving them away for pretty cheap. So I picked both of these up, like complete in box and everything. Discs were in kind of okay condition. I can get them resurfaced if I want to. Picked them up each for $5 each. And then, of course, another series I skipped out on the PlayStation 2, I got the Jak and Daxter series. And same thing. These are between $10 to $15 a piece. Good games, and really good condition, cases. Oh, it looks like Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier, which I think was the last game to come out in the series. I got that for $20. But, yeah, it looks like this one... Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier was made by High Impact Games. It was not made by Naughty Dog. And I'm pretty sure Naughty Dog, after Jak 3, maybe moved on to start working on their Uncharted game. But so I got Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy. I got Jak 2, which I think was the dark and gritty, one. And then Jak 3, which, same thing. It's like you look at the case arts, and then you see Jackster kind of like a goofy face in the Precursor Legacy, and then he gets angrier and angrier as the as the cases go. So I've heard a lot of good things about Jak 2 because it's a little bit more darker tone than the other ones. But I played the Precursor Legacy on the Vita, and it's definitely kind of like a fun kooky platforming game. So when I get into these, who knows? But I hope to get into them soon. This is a big stack. I've already went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 games. Oh God. All right, what else do I got? I got Grand Theft Auto: The Chinatown Wars for the DS. This was at the time when it first came out, it was a exclusive Grand Theft Auto game for the DS, and it had some very unique touchscreen features that you can only do in the DS. You can actually jump cars using the touchpad. You can, I think, work on dealing drugs somehow and packaging drugs like with the touchpad. Very unique gameplay elements that they utilize with this. So I had this when it came out, and I must have sold it at some point, but now I have it back in my collection again. I got Nightmare Creatures 2 for the Dreamcast. I talked about this game because a lot of the music in this game is made by Rob Zombie. So it's an interesting horror game. It's more action focused instead of horror focused, but yeah. Soundtrack by Rob Zombie makes every moment suspenseful, I guess. I ended up picking up Power Slave for the PlayStation. I didn't know they made it for the PlayStation. I knew they made it for the Sega Saturn, and the Sega Saturn version is like $250, $270. But the PlayStation version, for some reason, is $75. Which, I mean, there was more PlayStation games out there in the wild than there were Sega Saturn games. So I didn't do a deep dive enough to see which version was better, the Sega Saturn version or the PlayStation version. But I'm nonetheless happy to have the PlayStation version. I got Time Crisis Project Titan for the PlayStation. I have most, if not all, the Time Crisis games now. I think that was the last one I needed in my collection. So this one's kind of more of like a DLC. It's not one of the mainline games, and I think this was a PlayStation exclusive. It wasn't released in the arcades or anything like that. So I now have that. In terms of Xbox, I ended up picking up Manhunt for the Xbox, which I was trying to find Manhunt for the PlayStation 2, and I don't think they released Manhunt 2 for the Xbox. And I wanted Manhunt 1 and 2 for the PlayStation 2, like I said. And the copies of Manhunt that I found for the PlayStation 2, a lot of them weren't in the best of condition. And they were just still asking for like $40-$50 for that. And I'm like, ugh, I don't know. But I found this Xbox copy that was in pretty good condition. Like, good case, really good manual. The disc was in really good condition. So I was like, I'll just pick it up for the Xbox. So I think the Xbox hardware-wise was, better run. Steel Battalion Line of Contact. I have the Steel Battalion controller. So unfortunately, this didn't come with a book. I don't know if it did or not. But, I have the game. And this one's kind of like, almost like a DLC as well. This game does not work unless you have the controller. So you need the large Steel Battalion controller in order to play this game. You can't play this with a normal controller. So, oh no, it says Xbox Live required to play. Oh no, can I even play this game? I even think to look at that. Dino Crisis 3. I don't know why I bought this game. This game was not good, and I paid $70 for this. Ugh. Why do I do this? So Dino Crisis 3 came out for the Xbox, and it was completely different than Dino Crisis 1 and 2, which came out for the PlayStation at the time. And this was a Space Marine, you're fighting and destroying cybernetic alien dinosaurs on a spaceship. And it was in the era when Space Marine type shooters were all the rage. So Capcom was like, hey, let's take Dino Crisis 3 into space. And they did. And that's where the series died. So it wasn't the greatest game, but I now have the complete Dino Crisis 3 collection for whatever it's worth. The Outlaw series was kind of a wild time. I ended up picking up Outlaw Volleyball and Outlaw Golf. I picked up both of these for $5 each. I think this was part of a package deal, so I probably talked them down like $10 or $15 for the pack. But yeah, just a bunch of goofy, weird stuff. Let's see, Outlaw Volleyball was actually kind of fun, and it had like a big tattooed guy on the cover with like two girls, in front too, with small bikinis and everything. So I would say, what are they? It's pretty edgy, I guess, at the time, early 2000s, butt rock style gameplay with butt rock style music and whatever. And a bunch of crazy dudes. I think you can get into fights playing Outlaw Golf. It looks like I never played Outlaw Golf. I played Outlaw Volleyball, which was kind of fun, but Outlaw Golf I never played. Yeah, interesting. So, and then I got Enter the Matrix for the Xbox, which was a kind of like a companion story alongside of the Matrix movies. So it took place in between a lot of the movies and alongside of the movies too as well. There's actual exclusive film footage that they filmed for the movie that they just put in this game. So this is actually part of the overall canon of the Matrix series, which is kind of cool. So the game itself was fine. It wasn't, the greatest game, but I thought at the time it was when Matrix fever was high, this was a good game to have. What did I pick up on the Switch? I picked up Fatal Frame Maiden of the Black Water, the physical copy of it. This is in Japanese, so I hope it has English subtitles. I didn't try it yet, but I really hope it has English subtitles. And then Procession to Calvary, which is a Rembrandt art painting type game. I don't know how else to explain it, but that's the best way I can explain it. it's basically Rembrandt art paintings that are come to life in a video game form, and the humor is actually hilarious. Like it's really funny. Um, what else did I get? I ended up getting Resident Evil 3 Nemesis for the GameCube. Ended up getting this for like $100, which I think is a pretty good deal. Case is in good condition. Disc is actually pretty good for a GameCube game, and comes with a registration card as well. Looks like it does. And manual in good condition and everything. Health and safety precautions booklet. So, I didn't need this for the GameCube. I have it for the PlayStation already, but I have it for the GameCube, and I'm glad I do. Let's see what else. Speaking of Resident Evil, I have Resident Evil the remake and Resident Evil 0 for the Wii. And these were the Resident Evil Archives collection. These two games originally came out for the GameCube, and then I think they were just ported over to the Wii. And you can actually play this with a GameCube controller or a Wiimote and nunchuck. So I wonder how it's going to play with the Wiimote and nunchuck. I don't think it's not going to play like Resident Evil 4 did, because Resident Evil 4 had that third-person action-adventure camera, whereas these games were, kind of still the stationary tank control style gameplay. So I don't think it's going to work the same as Resident Evil 4, but it's going to be interesting to try with the Wiimote and the nunchuck. I also picked up Valfaris for the PlayStation 4. That is a very metal side-scrolling, action platformer, kind of like it's like Contra in space with like crazy alien technology and metal music. It's a PlayStation 4 game, so that's why I didn't talk about that in my metal music in video games podcast. What else do I have? Cartridges. I ended up picking up Legend of Zelda, the Ocarina of Time, for a coworker of mine. He wanted me to find a good copy of Legend of Zelda, so I found him one for $40. Good label. It's the gray cart, but he didn't really care about that. And there was varying conditions of Ocarina of Time out there on the floor. All different vendors were selling them for all different prices. So I picked what I thought was the best one. Doom 64 for the Nintendo 64. This was probably one of the more unique versions of Doom at the time. Very dark, and very kind of atmospheric type of Doom game. And then Kirby's Dream Land 2 for the Game Boy, the original Game Boy. Excited for this one. I was, obviously a huge fan of Kirby's Dream Land 1, so glad to have, two in my collection. I got, PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. I got Condemned 2 Bloodshot for the 360. Really excited for that one. The series is really cool. Kind of like a little bit wavy art on it, but it was the best. I didn't find a lot of these copies out on the floor, but this was the best one that I found. It's not terrible. If you look at it closely, you could tell it's a little bit wavy, but smells fine. And the disc is in good condition. And then also I picked up Clive Barker's Jericho. Condemned 2 was kind of like a first person, I guess the movie Seven kind of type game where it's like a gritty crime drama, but like, you're kind of hallucinating a lot. So very Silent Hillish. The enemies that you're fighting against, can kind of look like demons and monsters. So as a renegade special agent, Ethan Thomas, you are society's last defense against the darkness threatening to consume us all. So yeah, kind of like a lot of good hand-to-hand melee combat. And then, like I said, Clive Barker's Jericho. Clive Barker creature design, which is the only good thing in this game. The gameplay was a first-person shooter, which it wasn't the greatest first-person shooter type game. But you could play as 4 different heroes, and they all had different abilities, which was kind of cool. But yeah, like really good condition art, really good condition disc and everything. So I got the Devil May Cry HD collection for the PS3, which you get Devil May Cry 1, 2, and 3 on the PS3, which is kind of cool. Devil May Cry 2 wasn't the greatest. So it's on the 1 and 3 were probably the only good ones they have in this game. And Fear, First Encounter Assault Recon, which I'm surprised I didn't have this game because I had Fear 2 and 3 for the PlayStation 3, and I never had the first one. So that's interesting. I also got an inbox. I wanted to get the PlayStation 1, the PS1, and which was I talked about it in my PlayStation episode recently, where Sony made a mini version of the PlayStation, and they completely redesigned the look of it and made it like almost like a third of the size of the original PlayStation. So I was trying to find the PlayStation itself, and I found basically a complete in box for $100. And I was like, yeah, I'll take that. The box isn't in the greatest of conditions, but it's got all the foam in it, and the system's in there, and with all the cords and the controller and everything. It's white, so it's got a white controller in there as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad to have it. And then also, like, there was a guy selling vinyls, so I bought the Nine Inch Nails Downward Spiral album, which that was probably the best album in the whole bunch because there was a lot of like old vinyls. I think they even said I even saw like a Taylor Swift album in there. So I was like, okay, I got the Nine Inch Nails Downward Spiral album for like $30, so not bad. I also got a oh yeah, the other big thing, the big game that I got was Chrono Trigger for the SNES. I ended up paying $220 for it, which was pretty reasonable. Most vendors there were selling it for $250 to $270, just the cartridge itself, but $220 I thought was fair. The label itself, the art itself, is kind of looks a little bit faded, but to me, if it plays the game, that's kind of mostly what I care about. The label's not torn or anything like that. It still, looks in good condition. So, yeah, that's that. And then I picked up. I know this is kind of inconsequential, but ended up picking up a Monopoly game, Mass Effect Monopoly, sealed in the case. But the guy was actually pretty excited because when I bought it from him, he was like, "I brought this to so many conventions, and no one once has ever wanted to look at it." And I'm like, "Oh, that sucks." Well, I was like, "You can be rest assured that it's going to a house that will actually, appreciate it because I'm a big Mass Effect fan." He's like, "Well, I'm happy about that because, um, it's got to be frustrating when you're going to different vendors and different conventions, and it's like, man, no one's buying this thing, and it's like no one's even looking at it." So finally, he said someone bought it. So, yeah, let's jump into the topic at hand. Video game conventions. So the main talking point I'm kind of going to jump back and forth with is, I was recently at RetroFest Arkansas, and if you follow a lot of the collectors and a lot of the video game enthusiasts, and retro video game enthusiasts on YouTube, Retro Rick is one of the more kind of like prolific ones. He doesn't have like a ton of subscribers, but his claim to fame now is that he owns his own game store down in Conway, Arkansas, and it's a pretty big game store. I think the story was that it's one that he's frequented many times in his life. He lives down there, and the owners wanted to sell the place, so they asked him if he wanted to buy it, and he bought the store. Basically, I think it's turnkey. I think that's the phrase, right? Where they basically just handed him the keys and said, "Here you go. You're buying everything, all the stock in it." The employees stuck around, and yeah, I went down there a couple years ago for a road trip. I did like a kind of like a video game road trip where I kind of mapped out a route, stopped at some game stores along the way, and then came back. That was my final destination. And then after it's a really cool store. It's just like any retro video game store. It's got its games, but it's just bigger and a little bit more of like a museum. There were so many cool things to see in there. But so he decided last year he wanted to start his own game convention. He wanted to do a yearly game convention because if you've noticed over the last few years, retro video games has become pretty big. And I want to say, over the last like 4 years, it seems like there's retro video game conventions popping up everywhere in the country now. It used to be there would like be a lot of the big ones. Like there's one in Texas. We got one here, Midwest Gaming Classic, which is one of the bigger ones. And there's like other East Coast and West Coast ones, but now it's like it seems like they're popping up in every state. And not saying that is a bad thing, but it's good that now we're getting kind of like our own convention tour, so to speak, where if you wanted to attend a video game convention, you didn't have to like travel for a long time. In some cases there may be one nearby, and there may be one in your neighborhood. So this is the second year he's done this, and I was like, I had an extended weekend. I was looking ahead in my schedule, and I had an extended weekend. and I had off Columbus Day, so I was like, hey, like I'll take an extended weekend. I wanted to see if some friends could go, but none of us could match up our schedules. So I was like, well, I'll just go by myself, which I like doing road trips by myself. I think it's a good time to clear the head a bit and to catch up on some audiobooks and stuff. So yeah, basically packed up the car, drove down there on Friday. And the idea was I was going to camp at a campground nearby. And the campground was specifically for RV camping, and I tent camp. So I brought my tent and all my tent supplies and everything. The problem is that the campsite that I've got, and all the other campsites there were all RV gravel campsites, and no place for me to set my tent down. And there were no other available campsites at the time that were allowed me to basically put my tent and my sleeping mats on grass. I was literally sleeping on gravel. And the mat that I was sleeping on was not a big mat. It was a very thin mat because it's small enough that it packs down into a backpack. So it's basically all my camping supplies are kind of like backpack motorcycle camping size. So not very big. So I didn't sleep that well. And the campsite itself was like literally right next to a busy county road. So like, there was traffic running through that road like all night. And I was like, man, I slept like crap. Not to mention, I think I woke up with a spider on my face. I mean, when you're camping, you got to be used to that stuff. I mean, I woke up with bug bites on my legs, whatever. But because this was kind of near a river too. So, you got to deal with bugs. And normally I'm okay with that. But I was like, you know what? Maybe I should try to find a hotel tonight. So yeah, I was like, I'm not coming. I packed up Saturday morning. I was like, I'm not coming back here again. Booked a hotel 15 minutes away from the convention site. And I was like, I'm just going to do that. So I bought a weekend pass, and interestingly enough, the marketing material and the emails that I got said 9 a.m. the doors would open, but it didn't say specifically in those emails that was going to be VIP. So of course, if I go to the website and I go into the schedule itinerary, it said 9 a.m. VIP opening. And I'm like, man, I wish I knew that. But I was rest assured that a lot of other people in the line that I was in waiting thought the same thing, that thought everything opened up at 9. But yeah, whatever. So VIP only, you get in an hour early, and I think you get access to other things. But to me, the extra $40, I think, for the weekend pass wasn't worth it. I was just there to peruse the vendor hall, and so you walk in, place was packed. Like, it's not a massive convention hall, but it was enough that there was vendors all over the aisles. And man, at that time, it was nuts to butts in there. It was packed. It was hard to move around to see vendors in their tables, at least in the morning. It was tough because some people just don't know how to like operate or move around in public places with other people around. So a lot of times people are just like backing up and bumping into people and not being aware of like, hey man, there's other people around you. So, and then of course you got all these people pulling these wagons around, putting games in there and stuff, because you got people that come there with stacks of money and like we're ready to buy stuff and ready to buy some big stuff. And yeah, they're moving around with these wagons. There's like families bringing their kids in with these large strollers and everything. And it's just like, oh my God, you're making sure your ankles don't get broken in the process. But like I said, the place was kind of small, but it was filled to the brim, and it was busy. The aisles were wide enough that, you could still kind of move around, but still like, people are congregating in the aisles and just kind of hanging out and just, taking up space, talking, shooting the breeze with other people, whatever. And, and I'm fine with it. Like I'm not the type of person that, I mean, if you're the type of person that doesn't like feeling claustrophobic or being in a place with a lot of people, this would not have been the place for you. It was packed. There was people everywhere. So if you're the type of person that doesn't like that thing, I think you would have just probably zoomed on out of there. The vendors there were mostly selling video games. I would say 80% of them, but there were others. There was, vendors selling Pokemon cards, nostalgia items from the 80s and 90s, like WWF figures, G.I. Joes, Ninja Turtles, Transformers, all this other stuff, and so many other different types of toys and figures. There were people selling apparel. Like the thing now is like single stitch shirts from the 90s where, the shirts were pretty good cotton quality itself. But some of these shirts that they were selling were like between like $60 and $90 a pop for these nostalgia retro shirts. And I'm like, oh my God, why would you pay $90 for a t-shirt? But nostalgia is expensive. There was a vendor there too selling, there are vendors there selling VHS tapes. There was comic books, a couple of different booths selling comic books and graphic novels and stuff. There was one vendor that had vinyls. Like I said, I bought the Nine Inch Nails album there, and a bunch of different old and new eclectic ones. I think I saw some modern ones. I saw Taylor Swift's latest album there. I saw a couple other vendors had these like cool like 3D printed models and memorabilia. I'm always looking for cartridge holder 3D printed models. One of these days, I'm just going to buy my own and just make my own. But they had some cartridge holders that only held like one cartridge game or like 3 cartridge games, and they were selling them for, I think, too much. So I'm like, I kind of want something that holds more. So I kind of looked at those and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So if you want like a display piece of like, a Super Nintendo game or a Nintendo game, and they had like the cartridge holder that like hold, you put it in there and you can kind of use it as a display piece, that'd be kind of cool. But I wasn't really interested in that. But they had like 3D printed signs, you could put up a lot of different kinds, like, Silent Hill, Resident Evil, Nintendo, PlayStation logos, all this stuff. Pretty cool. Kind of in the back room, in the back area, because it was like in this big, open area hall. There was a stage. It hosted a bunch of video game tournaments, Mario Kart Double Dash, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Pokemon tournaments. They had music bands playing up there, and of course a cosplay contest and other. There was a also kind of like a panel hall, like where a lot of people would come and host panels. So of course a lot of content creators were there too. Couple JRPG Life, they were there. The Pixel Squad guys, Arkansas Picker, Rad Junk, she's a video game store owner down in Florida. They had a booth there, which is really cool. And Shady J from the Game Chasers. I was actually surprised that he was there because in a couple episodes ago, I talked about how the Game Chasers lost Billy, unfortunately, to brain cancer recently. So I talked about that and how that was a pretty big blow for a lot of us that followed the Game Chasers for a long time, and we felt like we were pretty close to Billy. But Jay was his kind of like brother in arms during the inception of the channel, and was there pretty much from day one all the way to the end with him. And he had a booth there too. And I think like I saw him and I was kind of shocked, and I was like, oh man, like what do I say to this guy? Like, it looks like he was kind of interacting with people, talking with people that he was with, his friends, And then I think the only thing I could say to him is like, hey man, I'm just, my condolences on your loss. Like, and he, thank you. And then I just kind of like let him be. Like, I just didn't want to be the type of person that's like, talking to him and just be like, oh man, like, let me talk about myself to you. I don't want to be that guy. So yeah, there were voice actors and live action actors there. Ernie Reyes Jr., he was in the Ninja Turtles 2 movie and Surf Ninjas. Billy Farmer, he does the voice of Goofy. A lot of people, a lot of kids there dressed as Goofy there, which is kind of interesting. Laura Faye Smith, she did the voice of Rosalina, as well as Princess Peach's voice actress was there. I forget her name off the top of my head. And then Kenny James, who does Bowser. There's so many other different voice actors there as well. So that's pretty cool. So some interesting observations that I saw, especially at this convention. And I've been to other video game conventions too, and so this is nothing new to me. But seeing content creators out in the wild is an interesting sight, especially if you've watched their channel and you've seen what their videos look like. And like I said, I've seen them before, and I'm not sure I can get used to how they film their content. Some of them just kind of film everything, like they have that camera running the whole time, and a lot of them will have like camera guys or camera girls following them. Some of them are just obsessed and just film everything, and some of them I've seen can be a little aggressive. They can push their way through others, kind of knocking people around, whatever, and interrupt you when you're talking to vendors to wheel and deal. Like I was talking to, I'm not going to name names, but I was talking to a couple vendors about something that they had. This vendor had a chainsaw controller for the GameCube, which I was like really excited about. So I was talking to the vendors, and then one of the content creators that I know, like, just basically puts his bag down right in front of me and starts like talking to the vendors, like completely interrupting me. And I'm just like, okay, I guess I'm done talking. And I don't think he even acknowledged that I was there. And I'm like, whatever, that's fine. I'm not going to be that petty about it. But I was just like, oh, okay, you're here now. I witnessed one other content creator take a look at someone else's haul that they were picking up. And the guy was like trying to talk him into letting him buy one thing out of the stack. He's like, oh man, that's really cool. Can I see that? I really want this. And I'm like, leave him alone, man. It was just weird. I witnessed the setup of many other deals. Like I would see content creators kind of like with their cameras coming up and talk to a vendor and set up the scene to be like, hey, I want to buy this game, but I want to film it. I want you to do this, and I want us to do this, go back and forth. And then, at the end we shake on it, we make a deal, and then I do this reaction or something like that. And I was like, man, that's really how they set up the videos, which makes sense. When you see a lot of these like game chasing videos, there is a lot of setup where it's like, it almost sounds like it's like, the scene has been played out and every actor has their role to play. So it's just interesting to see it now from like before the filming sequence, and how there's the agreement between the vendor and then the guy, basically the content creator themselves, like, doing the deal in front of the camera. So I saw like 2 or 3 situations like that over the weekend. I was like, huh, that's interesting. And I'm not knocking this. I'm a content creator myself. I mean, I'm not, but I'm also not the type to throw my camera around to film everything that I see on the floor. I did get some B-roll footage of me walking around the con, and you can check out my YouTube video on that. But I feel sometimes that when you're at a convention, you should be living in those moments. You should be kind of like experiencing, the crowd, moving around, checking out the games and stuff like that, instead of just being obsessed with just getting footage of everything you're doing. And taking a step aside and maybe like going off to the corner and be like, hey, let's do this interview. Let's talk with someone on the floor, or even like, kind of do a reaction if something happened on the floor, and maybe do like a reaction, like, so, hey, so this happened, that happened. But like a lot of times everyone's always obsessed with like grabbing things live, and having it be kind of like clickbaity, like, and unfortunately clickbait titles work. I was at a video game convention and then this happened, I picked up this game for super cheap. You will not, your jaw will drop at how much I spent, and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, clickbaity articles are kind of I hate to say it, but they're kind of the, nature of the game. They're just, it's just how the game is. That's what gets people to click on your videos, and whether you like it or not, that's just the reality of it. Like I said, those like kind of like moments I would prefer. Like, so say if I was like, if I was a content creator of this kind, I don't think I'd be filming on the floor and just like bumping people around with a camera. I think I'd be like, hey, let's take a step aside. Let's film a reaction, or let's film an interview talking with someone, and let's get back out on the floor and just kind of do things, whatever. But, sometimes people with the cameras that are just bumping into people and moving people around, and even just like interrupting the rest of us that are trying to maybe experience the con, I think that's pretty damn rude, So there's a time and a place for your damn cameras. And, granted, like I said, not all of them are like that. I would say there was a good portion of them that were like, I would say half of them were kind of really experiencing the floor and moving around. But then there were others that were just like, hey, let's just film something along the side. I can appreciate, some of the stuff like that. So if you've ever been to a video game convention, I feel like there's a lot of like kind of like ins and outs, almost like unwritten rules, and then just like even, yeah, I don't want to say laws, but like I guess just like common practices that you see that it's like, okay, this is how this is what I should expect from a video game convention. Most of the time, it's kind of deals with vendors selling stuff. And then also, like I said, there's celebrities there, there's panels, there's meetings, there's demos, there's other experiences you can have. I didn't mention that a lot of these conventions like have like arcades, like free to play arcades that you could play. There's they were giving away a Jeep, which was interesting. So there's like giveaways that they're doing and stuff like that. But if you're going to go to a video game convention, you could probably go and maybe just experience things and see things. But for me, if you go to a video game convention, it's like, hey, you want to pick up some stuff. So I would say number one is have a budget. For me, if I go to a vendor, if I go to a video game convention, I bring cash, and that's what I'm spending. I'm spending just what I bring is that cash. It keeps me from spending too much and just putting it on a credit card because sometimes, like especially cash, you can see. So you can see how much you're spending. You can see how much you have left, as opposed to just like putting it on the credit card and then just doing it constantly, and then even just having it to where it's like, man, I don't remember how much I spent. You could say like I want to use 1,500 as a budget, or 2,000 or 500 or whatever, and then it's like you almost forget how much you've spent already because you're trying to do the math in your head. And admittedly, even this happened to me once. I was using my card, and I would use it at different vendors. And the problem is that different vendors come from different parts of the country. So one time my credit card shut off. They said, even though I had money in there, it just basically said, hey, your credit card's declined. I called up my bank and they were like, yeah, we saw quite a few transactions from different parts of the country. And I was like, oh, I'm at a convention. So ever since that happened, it's just been straight cash for me. And honestly, most vendors prefer cash anyways because there are no fees attached to transactions. If you were to pay them PayPal, transferring that cash into their accounts, there's always a little bit of fee attached to it. Even if they have like a storefront, there's always like credit card fees. So, and then obviously once the cash dries out, I know I'm done. I don't, I can kind of see what I spend and see how much I have left. Create a list. It keeps you focused on what to look for. And some vendors can be overwhelming with what they have on their tables. Some vendors have like 8 tables of just games everywhere. So you can kind of get lost in the weeds of like just looking at everything and then forgetting what it is you want or what it is you were kind of looking for. And you're just like kind of like browsing everything. So I always write a list on paper and I say, these are the games I'm looking for. And then I'll consult that list at most of the booths I'm at. And I'm like, okay, let's look for this. Let's look for that. See if these are there. See if those are there. It helps you narrow your search down. And then obviously it keeps you sticking to the list instead of just like, well, I kind of want that, or I kind of want this. And then like you find out the things you actually wanted, you can't buy anymore because, well, you blew your money on other things. One of the biggest ones is please respect the space around you. I don't like to hover over one area for too long. So if I'm at a vendor booth and I'm like looking at the PlayStation section, I'm not sitting there for 5 minutes. Okay. I kind of just like look to see if is anything I'm looking for in this stack, and then and then I'll move on, because I'm pretty sure other people are trying to get in, jockey in to kind of look at the, that particular stuff as well. Especially if a vendor booth is busy. And in most cases, especially if you go on a Saturday, everywhere is going to be busy. Most people you counter though are respectful of the space and will allow you to share the space, especially like if you want to just like kind of like shoulder your way in. But others I've noticed get a little pissy when you move into their area that they've stood in for a few minutes. And it's like, who are you? Like, this is a public space for everybody. Move around the booth, maybe move back to the same area once it clears up again. So it's like, if you see there's maybe other people trying to get into that same space, like, hey, I'll come back to this, and most of the time, you move away for a minute or two and then you find that space open again. Then you can just go back. I ain't going anywhere. Even communicate with those around you. Like a lot of times it's like you kind of look at you're moving sideways and other person's moving sideways. And then you kind of look at each other and be like, hey, let's swap spots. So talk to people in person. A lot of times you can kind of, work things out with other people. Like, hey, you want to switch spaces? And then we'll switch back, whatever. Some people aren't even aware that they've been hovering over a spot for a long time. Like you kind of like nudge in there and they're like, oh, I've been here for a while, haven't I? And then they move around. One other thing I like to do as well is like if I'm at a vendor and I see a game that I want, I pick up the game. And it's like most of the time vendors will allow you to kind of walk around their booth as long as they can see you. But, it's a lot of work for vendors to watch everybody. So a lot of times I'll pick up a game and I'll say, hey, can you hold on to this for me? I'm going to look at the rest of your stuff. And they'll say, cool. Because, then that's one less thing for them to worry about, to think like, is that guy going to run off with the game? It's just a common courtesy thing. It's not like anybody tells me to do it, but I just felt like if I was a vendor, I think I would want someone to do that to me. So, so the vendor's not sitting there thinking, is he going to run off with that game? Which that'd be pretty shitty thing to do. But, these are the places to make offers. Most, if not all, vendors at conventions are open to negotiation. So, but be reasonable. Be reasonable in your negotiations and don't offend them with dumbass offers. Generally, for me, if I want to negotiate, like I create a stack of games. I don't offer a bulk price. So if it's like a stack of like 5 games for like $50, total, because it's like every game is $10, and I'll say, hey, would you do 40 for this? And I try to be in the range of $10 to $15 under what the total price would be. It works sometimes, but oftentimes they'll counter with their own price. If it's pretty valuable games, they'll say, you know what, I want to stick with the price, what I listed it at, or maybe they'll just say, can we meet halfway? Which is fair. That's how this game goes. Don't be a jerk about it. If they want to sell the items, they want to sell the items, but they don't want to sell specifically you the items. There's no connection with you and that vendor. And I think some people get a little bit lost in that because then they're like, well, okay, no, I'm not going to put this back for me. The vendors will be like, okay, all right, because you know what? Someone else is going to come by and buy that same damn game. And sometimes they won't even negotiate on the price. They'll just say, hey, this is a good price. I'll pay for it. So there's no connection with you and the vendor. So what I hate, sometimes it just annoys me when I overhear like, buyers coming in and they make a side comment like, well, this is like more than what price charting says, and then just gives it back to the vendor like, shut up. Because you have these people that look at eBay prices and they'll look up price charting on their phones, and everything, I'm telling you, everything at a video game convention, everything at a store is gonna be priced more than what price charting is. It's just how it is. Everybody wants to make as much money as they can. And price charting isn't necessarily the most accurate because we know prices change daily. So, some vendors maybe are going to buy a game and they're going to sell it more for what they bought it for. So there's going to be a lot of that involved in it. And there's condition differences too. Some games are not in perfect condition. Some games are in very immaculate, condition. So there's going to be price fluctuations. At one vendor, if they're not going to negotiate with you, you could just go to maybe find another vendor, and who knows, you may find it for a cheaper cost. That's how the game goes. They don't, like I said, they don't care who you are specifically. They'll shrug their shoulders and wave you off. They'll say goodbye because someone else will come by and buy it. However, if you are looking for deals, the best time to go is the last day of convention, which is usually Sunday, and more so at the end of the day. Vendors want to sell as much as they can, so they're more willing to entertain bigger offers on Sunday. A lot of time when I was walking around the floor on Sunday, every vendor was like, "Hey, I'm willing to make offers." Sometimes they'll even put signs up to say, "Hey, we're clearing these out," or "This box of games is going to be 50% off," stuff like that. So that would be the time to get some really good deals. So on Sunday, this is where you can kind of maybe be a little bit more bold. Take your chances, shoot your shot. You never know. Worst thing they could say is no, and then you can move on. Or you could just meet them halfway. And like I said, vendors don't care who you are. They won't listen to your sob story about like how like, oh man, this game was like very nostalgic for me as a kid. I love this game. I played it so much when I was a kid. The vendors are like, okay, whatever. Like they don't care. They're not going to cry over it and be like, okay, I'll sell it to you for that. Most vendors are accepting trades actually. So if you're short on cash, but not on items you'd be willing to part with, bring them with you when you offer them up as trades. Most are not willing to pay straight out cash for it though. For God's sakes, please bring the items with you. There was like 2 or 3 times where I saw people coming up to vendors this weekend and saying, hey, are you taking trades? And the vendor's like, yeah, what do you got? And, they would be like, well, I have these things. And it's like, do you have them with you? Can I see them? And they're like, well, no, I don't have them with me. But what would you give me for them? They're in my car. What do you think you'd give me for them? And then the vendors would be like, well, I have to see the condition of the items in order to give you an accurate, trade value. And then like, can you give me a ballpark? Like, no, they're not going to guess, So you either bring the items with you to show them like, hey, this is what I have. Worst case they could say is no, which sometimes they say, no, I'm not interested, or I'm only interested in maybe this, or that, or whatever. So you never know. Shoot your shot. Bring what you have. So, and, but, if you come in and do that whole, like, well, I don't have them with me, but give me a ballpark, give me an idea what you'd pay for them, they're going to turn you away. Say, no, get out of here. And for my, please wear deodorant, wear clean clothes, because you're going to be around other people. Don't make it miserable for everybody else. Okay. You're in a public place, so please wear clean clothes and at least some body spray, for crying out loud. And I think one other thing too is, I try to be conscious of the environment, and most vendors will, if you buy a couple things, they're like, hey, they're going to put it in a plastic bag for you. Bring your own bag. Most vendors, like I said, will happily give you a plastic bag, but if you plan to buy a lot of things at the convention, like just bring a backpack. I brought a big athletic bag with me and just shove things in there. Or, like I said, some people bring wagons and they, throw things in the wagon if they, breaking people's shins. So don't forget to take breaks. Honestly, what I would do is I'd bring my own snacks and drinks in the convention, especially if I'm carrying a backpack or a bag with me. Water bottle, Gatorade bottle, some meal bars and stuff. Most places that you go into allow you to carry in food and drink items. The convention halls will sell food, snacks, and drinks, but they're always overpriced for what they should be, really. And just sit down and enjoy a panel or music act, or just like, sometimes I like to sit around and just like people watch, and just see kind of like how people interact and whatever, and just, chill out. So gives you a chance to breathe, relax, kind of get, maybe even think about, oh yeah, there was that vendor that had this, I want to go back there. Kind of helps you plan your next attack. Lastly, and this may be a divisive thing, but it's true, because like I said, I've had personal experiences with this, and I'm pretty sure other ones of you have too. Do not be surprised if the content creator you follow is rude or just kind of, I guess, different than in real life. Content creators, as you all know, put on personas on camera, and they're characters on film or in audio form. And in some cases, that's not who they are in real life. There is a saying to never meet your heroes in a lot of cases, because a lot of times their reputation doesn't stand up to who they are in real life. And I've met creators before in the past that I used to follow that I promptly unfollowed them after a convention due to a kind of like a bad interaction I've had with them, or even witnessed interactions I've seen with them and others. And I can get sometimes that they could be a little annoyed with maybe people coming up to them and bombarding them with praise or questions or, conversations or whatever. And then, maybe just one innocent approach from a fan will just trigger them to the point where it's like, they've been, pecked constantly for the last like couple hours. And then of course, like their patience is withered down to like a slim amount. And then maybe like some innocent person comes and says, hey, I'm a big fan of your channel. And then they give you like, a crappy response back. And it's like, oh, okay. So a lot of times you have to kind of like play a role even when you're in public sometimes. Or just be your authentic self on camera or in audio. Like, don't change who you are just because you're a content creator. If you're the type of person that is maybe rude in real life, maybe that's how you should be on camera. I don't know. I mean, I guess there's two sides to everything. But and in those cases, it's tough not to judge them for that. Generally, I'm not saying this because I feel others should do it. It's just what I do. But if I see someone in the wild that's a content creator that maybe I follow that I appreciate, I'll just simply say, hey, I'm a big fan of your channel. Like, keep up the good work, And, a lot of times they'll say, hey, thanks, and then I move on. That's it. It's very rare that I engage in conversation with everybody. Like I said, when I saw Shady J, I was like, man, there were so many things I wanted to say to that guy, but it's like, I'm not going to be that fan. I'm just going to say, hey, my condolences. And then I just move on. Like, if he really wanted to have a conversation with me, he would probably, engage in conversation with me. All he said was thank you. And I was like, that's it. I'm just going to move on. To me, sometimes I feel like they're there to experience the convention too. And I don't have much to say to them anyway. I think there was like one time I met the two guys from Gaming Off the Grid. I met them at MGC like a couple years ago, and I was like, oh, wow, these guys are here. That's really cool. And I think I just said to them, hey, big fan of the channel. Like, your recent video made me want to pick up light gun games. And they were like, oh, that's really cool. So like we got into like a small little conversation, and I was like, hey, enjoy the convention. And I just moved on. So don't overstay your welcome. Keep in mind they're there to experience the convention too. They're there to see things, pick up things. maybe interact with people that they want to meet, and stuff. So, yeah, but just don't, like I said, don't be surprised if all of a sudden the person that you watch on camera is completely different than what they are in real life. Like, be careful when you meet your heroes. I do want to thank Hair of the Dogcast Network for allowing me to share the company of other podcasts. So check out the Patreon at patreon.com/Hair of the Dogcast and consider donating to access early release and exclusive episodes, as well as an invite into the Discord community. You can follow me on social medias like X, Instagram, and Threads at RetroX Podcast, as well as my YouTube channel. I post updates on when new episodes drop and other content, and of course, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on, make sure to enable notifications so you know when new episodes get released. If you have topic ideas in mind you'd like me to discuss, comment in any of my social medias and or on Spotify, and let me know what you're interested in hearing more about. I'd love to take feedback and questions from you all. So thanks for listening.